Hello and welcome back to what will be the last video in the series of the Idiot's Guide, Rikadin's Idiot's Guide to Modding F1 2020 with myself, Rikadin, aka RM the Welshman. This one, we're not going to talk about modding itself. We are going to go through and I'm going to show you exactly all the changes that we've made so far, all the things that we've loaded and the process we've done, exactly what that then does in game. To do that, for a little bit of ease, I went through and did a race. I've just done a career race in Zandvoort. I'm going to take you start to finish in terms of the changes that I made. I start at the team hub. So as you can see, we've got the custom car here. We've talked at length about this, so I'm not going to go too much into detail, but we can see the branding, we can see the numbers, and how that then applies in game. You can also see the custom badges and the custom badges up here against your name, and that's what changes within the menu. We then go into still the drivers, so you can see that obviously this all of this is then changed by the stuff that we talked about in the race suit video. So things like the caps, what you won't see, the boots that they're wearing. But this is what they then look like on a 3D model. You'll see the sponsors here, and what I was talking about where the badge applies to this area here, and hence why to leave that area blank, and how that then looks. The one thing I will say though is I still need to do a little bit of tinkering, because where the badge applies on here, even if there's a transparency or not, it seems to overwrite this texture around here. So you'll see where the stitching has gone back to black. So that's something that I need to tinker with just to make it a little more tidy. But you'll see it's a far more crisp, clean look. Then we go into the garage menu. So you'll see that we've got our team in their race gear. As we pan around, we've got the custom imagery on all the monitors with the background, which is our primary team color. So you can choose whatever that is in game yourself. And then we pan around and we'll pause it there. So we can see that when we did the racewear, because this is all governed by the racewear itself. If you remember, I've used a Williams template. So these are very much Williams t-shirts, just recolored. Now, what that makes it a little bit easy, if you base your design on a team that's already in there, it's just then a case of changing colors and replacing components. So for example, I've replaced Williams' sponsors on the arm, or adding various bits and pieces. You'll have a very good reference point that works in the game, because the game and the entire team will have designed that. So use their hard work rather than tinker around is my advice. You can see there where I've just changed the accents on the trousers and the shoes that I mentioned as well, just for those finer touches. You can change all that again if you want to. You can change colors, you can do whatever you wish with your team design. But I wouldn't go complicated. If it's your first time doing a setup, I wouldn't go really complicated in terms of what's going on. So next up, and I'll get the pause button ready. Here we go, pulling back in after a practice. We'll move it back a little bit. There we go. So we can see all the team again in their custom gear. We can also see radio sets and headsets, which, if you remember again, when I was talking about the racewear, there were items that I said just leave them alone. And that's what these relate to. So you will have a radio in there. You'll have things that govern the headsets. So you can change them if you wish to. But again, if you start off with the basics like I have here in terms of just the teamwear itself, and then you can tinker with it. Once you've got a base to build from, add pieces rather than going for, I'm going to do everything at the first opportunity. Introduce something, see if it works, and then if it does, great, build on it. Because what you might end up doing is you might end up then overcomplicating things a lot in terms of how that then works. You'll see as well we've got our custom badges as well in here. They get applied to various areas in the garage. Now we'll head over onto the grid and I'll move forward a bit, because what we actually want is we want Lando's car. So, and I mentioned when we were doing the race liveries and the numbers that I also did number 4, which is obviously Lando's number. So as you can see here, that automatically applies the number 4 in the style that I wish onto my car. So it doesn't take from his former team identity, it takes from mine. We'll move around to the front and you'll see it's also on the front as well. So it will automatically apply that. I haven't yet worked out, there is a way, because when drivers move between teams in the game itself, there is a way that their identity, so they have little flags and little names, apply to the car. And I haven't yet worked out how to do that. That's going to be one of the finer points that I try and tinker with, because I think that might be more of a coding thing than a design thing. But if I do figure out, then I will do a follow-up video with lots of little bits and pieces in terms of how that's then done. So again, let's pause that and let's move forward. So this is the helmet overview from the car itself, and I just wanted to quickly point this out because I know when we were doing the helmet video, there were a few things I mentioned that look different in menus. So for example, the finish of the helmet here looks a lot different. It's dark and light, exactly as I wanted it to look. We've also got these parts here, which if you remember from the menus looked quite grey. Here they are chrome. They're finished in chrome. So there's another thing that I've pointed out between how things look in menus and how things look in game can differ. So you might need to play around. And also I'll point out the difference in finish between the jet black lid of the helmet, which is chromed, and the front panel, which is matte. You can see there the difference in tone that the texture file, the Sierra file makes, the SFC file. We'll then go into pit stops. Now, I do need to tinker a little with the Haas helmets, because if you remember, I said that I'd based them on Haas. I changed over from Red Bull because I couldn't get the Red Bull ones to work because they're very complicated helmets. And after looking at the different helmets, it's mainly because all the teams have massively different helmets. For example, Renault's looks like they're on a mountain bike because they're mountain bike style helmets with goggles as opposed to a visor. But what I will point out is that even though this on the design file is dark all the way around here, in fact, the whole helmet is the same color. We can see this dark panel here, and actually that's a design feature of Haas's helmets. Now, when I talk about tinkering, I now know that whatever color this is represented as in the SFC file is the color that I then want to color the rest of this helmet to make it the same color. So it's not entirely impossible, and it's just a case of playing with it, finding out what works, what doesn't. And it's why I said with the racewear, and I'll say it with this, change little but change often, rather than change lots, because if you change lots and then it doesn't work, you then have to try and work out what hasn't worked. But what you will see as well is, I'll point out, you'll see the gloves here that we imported. If you recall when we were talking about the pit crew, we imported the gloves, Red Bull gloves. We did our own custom design for those gloves, but we also then imported parts of the Red Bull template onto what was the Sauber template, the Alfa Romeo template. No, it wasn't. It was the Haas template, because it's on the helmet. It's on the helmet design. But you'll see that not only have they been imported as a pattern, but the textures of the gloves are the same. So they look like the gloves we want them to, rather than a skin applied over a different shape of glove. That's why it's important to change all three files, because if you didn't, that wouldn't happen. We then got, so pulling into the pits, this is what the pit crew looks like in their animations. Fluid, the overalls look as they should, because I've just used the same files from the Alfa Romeo team. So it looks smooth, it looks exactly as it should in game. And again, there's a lot of people have put a lot of effort into this game, making this game. If you use their effort, you can't really go wrong. And then finally, I'll talk about, obviously, start to finish, we can see helmet design, we can see the team here as a podium celebration, we can see the race suits in a moment, and how that then works. Unfortunately, Lando broke down in this race, so he's not joining us on the podium. But what you'll see in a minute is what I mean about the rear design of the race suits. So as they get busy spraying champagne, as my driver turns around, which he will do in a minute when he steps back onto the podium, is what you'll see, there we go, is you'll see this shape on the back here. So if you cast your mind back to when we were designing the race overalls themselves, these were in two parts and at two different sides. So you had one side was on the far left and one side was on the far right. This is what I mean about it's a little bit fiddly to try and get this to join up, because if you imagine this seam that runs all the way down my driver's back in the center is the center point of those overalls. Anything that you want to cross sides, so for example on the Mercedes ones you've got the AMG Petronas, you've got Tommy Hilfiger, you've got a Puma badge, that on their design will exist on both sides, will exist on the far left and on the far right. So you have to be certain you've got it in the same aspect ratio, the same size, and in the same at the same height for it all to match up. And it can be a little fiddly, certainly if you're doing something for the first time. So I might add more features to my race suit over time, but I'll just throw that one out there just so that you know that that part can be a little bit fiddly. The last thing I'm going to touch upon, I'm going to load back into game for this. So I talked about the way we loaded the car livery in and in terms of sponsors. Now, because I've used a car that isn't designed, so the RaceNet car isn't designed to have sponsors change. You can see here in game, I can't change the sponsors. It's mindful that if you use a different car design that you can change sponsors on, then leave the areas where the sponsors would appear to be blank, if that's what you want. For example, if this was loaded onto a car that could load sponsors could be loaded on, you'd have this Equinox badge here, and you'd have whatever sponsor would be overwritten over the top of this, and it would look quite strange. So just bear that in mind. For example, if you cast your mind back to when we were doing the gloves, the racewear video, there was the Pacifico logo in the middle that was taken because I'd selected a different car. Your race suit will, in part, take the sponsors from your vehicle. Again, and it's exactly the same with the car. I'm going to leave the video there. I just thought I would do a video just to run you through exactly what changes all of this has made in game, because I appreciate I'm just an idiot giving you a guide. But it's just so you can see that after all of this tinkering and after all of this time and effort and everything else and everything that I've talked about, it does have a real result in the game. For the moment, I'm going to leave this video here. I might do a few videos in the future when I figure out more things, like in terms of pit gantries and other bits and pieces in the garage and how to tinker with. But for now, I will leave it there. Again, if you found these videos useful, give the profile a like, give it a subscribe. It would be most appreciated, because the bottom line is, at the end of the day, I'm only doing this to try and save people some time, because I know it took me a few hours to get my head around all of this over quite a number of days, and it can be quite a steep learning curve. But if it helps one person, then I have played my part. For now, I will leave you at that. This has been Rikadin. Rikadin out.